Krishna Karupate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Bhakta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshware Rishabhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Adi Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We're starting a new chapter. An echo, I don't know why. It's chapter 3. So I'm going to ask again. Well, I didn't even have to ask Nanda Gopal, but those of you who are considerate enough to turn on your yes, what is it called? Videos. Yeah. It's nice to see people. I mean, we talk about we're personalists and we talk about the impersonalist, and yet we seem to act so impersonal sometimes. So I'm going to chant. Everyone can repeat. We're chanting the first verse of the 3rd chapter. You can probably put it on, or those can repeat even without it. It's not so hard. Okay. Oh, that's not it. You got to go back one verse there. There we go. Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna Vacha.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Jayaste Karmanaste.
Buddhir Janardana.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna Vacha.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Jayasi Karmanaste.
Mata Buddhir Janardana.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna Vacha.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Mata Buddhir Janardana.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava. Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna Vacha.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Jayasi Chet Manaste.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Nyo Jayasi Keshava.
Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna Vacha.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste.
Mata Buddhir Janardana.
Mata Buddhi Janardana.
Tat Kim Karmani Gore Mam.
tat kim karmani ghore mam
नियोजयसि केशव
niyojayashi
Keshava.
keshava.
Arjuna Vacha
Arjuna
Arjuna
vacha
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste
jayashi chit karmanaste
Mata Buddhir Janardana
mata buddhi janardana
Tatkim Karmani Gore Mam
tat kim karmani ghore mam
Niyojayasi Keshava.
niyojayashi keshava.
We got it. We got it going here. Anyone else? Arjuna.
Vacha
Arjuna Vacha
vacha
Jayasi Chet Karmanaste
jayashi chit karmanaste
Mata Buddhir Janardana
mata
Mata
buddhi
Buddhir
janardana
Janardana
Tat Kim Karmani Ghore Mam
tat kim
Tatkim
karmani
Karmani
ghore
Ghore
mam
Mam
Niyojayasi Keshava.
niyojayashi
Niyojayasi
keshava.
Keshava.
Arjuna Vacha.
Arjuna
Arjuna
vacha
Vacha
Arjuna said,
Arjuna
Arjuna
said
said
Jayasi,
jayashi
Jayasi
better.
better
better
Jet,
chit
if.
if
Karmanaha,
karmanaha
Karmanaha
then fruitive action.
then
fruitive
fruitive
action
action
Te,
te
by you.
by you
Mata
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 is considered.
is considered
Buddhi,
buddhi
intelligence.
intelligence
Janardana,
janardana
O Krishna.
O Krishna
Tat,
tat
therefore,
therefore
him,
kim
why.
why
Harmony,
karmani
action.
in action
Ore,
gore
ghastly.
ghastly
Mam,
mam
me.
me
Yojayasi,
niyojayashi
you are engaging.
you are engaging
Keshava,
Keshava
O Krishna.
O Krishna.
Translation, Arjuna said, O Janardhan, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has very elaborately described the constitution of the soul in the previous chapter, with a view of delivering his intimate friend Arjuna from the ocean of material grief. And the path of realization has been recommended, Buddhi Yoga, or Krishna consciousness. Can you mute everybody, please? Can everybody? Sometimes Krishna consciousness is misunderstood to be inertia, and one with such a misunderstanding often withdraws to a secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna. But without being trained in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it is not advisable to chant the holy name of Krishna in a secluded place, where one may acquire only cheap adoration from the innocent public. Arjuna also thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi Yoga or intelligence and spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerities at a secluded place. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. But as a sincere student, he placed the matter before his master and questioned Krishna as to his best course of action. In answer, Lord Krishna elaborately explained karma yoga, or work in Krishna consciousness, in this third chapter. Arjuna vacha jayayasi chit karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tatkim karmani goremam neo jayasi keshava. Arjuna said, O Janardhan, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachane Nivasesa Sunyavadi Prasachade Satarane. So I'm going to ask everyone who does not have their videos on, if you can please turn on your videos. Thank you, at least those who do it. Okay, so this is a nice verse. We're understanding a little bit of Arjuna. There are several things. One is he doesn't really want to fight. Well, nobody else turned on their videos, except for those who have it on. Okay, maybe you didn't hear me. If those, we appreciate if you turn on your videos so we can see people. We can have a personal dialogue or exchange. Otherwise, it's impersonal.
Prabhu, I'm driving.
Okay.
Can I be excused?
Yes, yes, please. I don't want to watch your highway
Okay.
adventures. Okay. So number one is Arjuna doesn't really want to fight. He thinks it's wrong. He has his reasons. He gave Krishna his reasons. Krishna gave so many different things about why you should fight. But if you look at, I just like to read some of these last instructions. Now, when somebody's instructing, it's the last instructions. Just like, for instance, in the, you may not know this, but in the beginning of this movement, maybe not the very beginning, but at least in 1970, there was a time, maybe 69, where maybe 71, I don't know, around that time, where Prabhupada talked about polygamy, that a man who there's so many men and so many women, generally more women than there are men. All women have to get married, and men should remain celibate if they can. So therefore, there's not going to be enough men to marry the woman. So therefore, polygamy in previous cultures was okay. And at least at one point, Prabhupada, I don't know if he allowed it or he didn't say anything about it, but there were some few devotees who had more than one wife. And then when Prabhupada found out, not so much about it, but when found out that it was a disaster, he said that this has to end. Most you can have is one wife. So I hope I don't disappoint anyone here. But so now people can quote things where Prabhupada said where we can get more than one wife. But it's the last thing that Prabhupada said that is the most important thing to follow, that you don't have more than one wife. He said you can't even handle one wife. How are you going to deal with more than one wife? So we're Westerners, we're different. Vedic culture, it was okay. Kings would have so many wives. But so therefore, his last instruction was you should not. So now you can quote an earlier instruction, but that doesn't matter. So even in this second chapter, Krishna said so many things, but I'm just going to read some of the later verses. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exists no longer. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So now this is using your intelligence, you're satisfied. How do you think of yourself satisfied? It's just kind of like sitting alone, you're peaceful. You don't think of yourself satisfied by being in a war fighting with a bunch of people. So if you hear this verse, you might think a little differently than Krishna's maybe saying. Then the next verse, one who is not connected with the Supreme, who's not in Krishna consciousness, can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So, this whole idea of peace, being satisfied, have transcendental mind. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So our mind should be within. We should think you can interpret these things in that way. Therefore, Almighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. So I have my senses restrained from the objects, from my bow and arrows, from all these people. I'm just giving one way Arjuna could get confused here. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-control. And the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So I'm striving to satisfy these desires by fighting this war so I can get my desires fulfilled. I can't be peaceful. I should just be intelligent and just not fight. These are just some verses here, the last few verses of the second chapter. A person who has given up all desire for sense gratification, who lives free from desires. If you don't have any desires, why should I fight this war? Who has given up all sense of proprietorship. I don't own anything, nothing is mine, and is devoid of false ego. He alone can attain real peace. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So by reading those verses, if I just heard those verses, I would think, where does it have anything to do with saying that we should fight? It sounds like we should just sit back and meditate. We should just try to become peaceful. Shanti, shanti, shanti. Any questions? So this is, by reading that, it doesn't sound like he should fight. So now he's saying, oh, Janardhan, okay, sure. Why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? Because you did say that. But now you're saying this other thing. If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work is fighting this war so I can get the fruits. And my intelligence is saying something else. So, when we read the second chapter now, we understand it because we kind of know what Krishna says later on in the Bhagavad Gita. But without hearing anything further, it's hard to come to this conclusion, because later on in the chapter, he says another thing, which I just read those last verses. So now in the purport again, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has very elaborately described the constitution of the soul in the previous chapter. So the second chapter is all about how you're not the body. You're a spirit soul. You're eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. You have nothing to do with this material world, the three modes of material nature, this body. You're a completely separate thing. So he mainly explained about that. And explaining about that, we shouldn't lament for the body. We have a body. We had billions and billions of different bodies. Why should we be so attached to this body or to someone else's body who also had billions and billions of bodies? So he explained, this is a really good chapter, the second chapter, which is what I generally read when someone passes away. I read a lot of these verses in the beginning of this chapter, and you get a really good understanding of how it's how not to lament. You don't feel like lamenting. You see that they just left. And if anything, you pray, go on. Don't stick with this body. Just go to the next destination. So, with a view, okay, I'll read that sentence again. Krishna elaborately described the constitution of the soul in the previous chapter with a view of delivering his intimate friend Arjuna from the ocean of material grief. So he was suffering. He didn't want to see his friend suffering. Of course, he put him into illusion. He didn't have to do that. But then the Bhagavad Gita wouldn't have been available for everyone else who was suffering. We're all suffering. So Krishna has made it so that he made his dear friend suffer so that others will not have to suffer. So others can learn this. And it's just some temporary suffering. So it's like sometimes I've seen once they got these, oh, I forget what they're called, these tasers, you know, when you get tased by the police. So the police were trying it out. Somebody volunteered to get tased. So they tased the person, and then they experienced it, and you can learn a lot. I remember in the Navy, we were in a pressure chamber. A pressure chamber was they put you in this as if you're up 40,000 feet in the air, what it's like, and we all have masks on. We have masks on because we have oxygen coming in. And what they do, and it really worked, because I'll remember this. I can't say I'll remember it the rest of my life, but I remembered it thus far in my life. but they while we're in there, they have two people. They picked two people who weren't paying attention in class. Fortunately, I don't know how, but it wasn't me this time. And they had them take off their mask and play patty cake. Anybody know what patty cake is? It's where you do something like patty cake.
I know.
Okay, Okay, good. So they made them do that. And then after just doing it for a few minutes, they just started going like this. And they said, put on your mask, put on your mask, put on your mask. And they didn't put on their mask. And then someone else put their masks on. That two people put on their masks. And then they start breathing again. And just a few moments without oxygen, and you really get messed up. You can't understand anything. They couldn't put on their masks. So they demonstrated. So they experimented with two people. So Krishna is using Arjuna as an example, and Arjuna is really experiencing this. He's really put into this illusion. He's really feeling this pain and distress, and Krishna is trying to relieve him, but trying to relieve him the same way all of us can be relieved from this pain and distress, by hearing Bhagavad Gita and understanding it. So his questions are similar to questions we might have. So he's doing all of this to his pure devotee, intimate friend, not because it's only because he's trying to help millions and billions of other people, and who can take advantage of the Bhagavad Gita. So, and the path of realization has been recommended. He recommended the path of realization, Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness. So he has, by the way, Krishna explained Buddhi Yoga, intelligence is better than fruitive work. Then why do you want me to fight? It's a completely legitimate argument. Of course, sometimes when we feel a certain way about a certain thing, we want we see everything in that light. So we might say, you're saying why you should do a certain thing and you don't want to do it, and you see different things why you shouldn't do it, and even things somebody explaining to you why you should do it, and you take that and turn it around. So that tendency was also there in Arjuna, because he didn't want to do it, so it came and he couldn't understand it. He saw it a different way. So sometimes Krishna consciousness is misunderstood to be inertia. Inertia is, just sitting around doing nothing. And one with such a misunderstanding often withdraws to a secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Krishna. So we think Krishna consciousness is I go to the Himalayan mountains and I chant, or a secluded place somewhere, which you can't find too many secluded places nowadays. But and you chant Hare Krishna, and you think that's what Krishna wants us to do. It's not what Krishna wants us to do. What he wants us to do is use all our senses in his service. And someone may be able to go to a secluded place and chant Hare Krishna, but 99.9% of us will not be able to do that. Actually, and because we had one devotee once, he wanted to be a Babaji, just chant Hare Krishna. He wanted to go to the forest and chant Hare Krishna. And Prabhu said, what would you do? You'll simply think of sex life. It doesn't matter. You go anywhere and you have to engage your senses. Otherwise, your senses are going to pull you here and there. So especially when there are devotees who can do this, very advanced devotees. After many, many years of practice, they might be able to do this in a secluded place. But that's only very, very rare. And even if you could do it, it's not like Srila Prabhupada couldn't go to a secluded place and chant Hare Krishna. But that's not his mission. And that's not our mission, if we're following Prabhupada. It's to preach Krishna consciousness. It's to use our senses in Krishna's service and distribute his books, tell other people about it, set a good example. There's so many things we have to do in order to serve Krishna, and we use all of our senses in doing that. So, back here, withdraw to a secluded place to become fully Krishna conscious by chanting the holy name of Krishna, but without being trained in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. It is not advisable to chant the holy name of Krishna in a secluded place. So this is not advisable. You don't do it. It's not, and 99.9% of the time, it ain't going to work. And it says, where one may acquire only cheap adoration from the innocent public. So the innocent public may think you're really something. You're a Haridas Thakur, you're a great devotee, but your mind is somewhere else. Your mind isn't thinking of Krishna. You're chanting Hare Krishna, and then you wind up chanting Hare Krishna to impress people. So they give you money. And then maybe, you find some nice young girl who really appreciates you, and you run off with her and get married. So you get some cheap adoration, at least while you're doing it. But what good is that? That's not going to help you to go back home, back to Godhead. That's not going to make you peaceful. So Arjuna also thought of Krishna consciousness or Buddhi yoga or intelligence and spiritual advancement of knowledge as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerities in a secluded place. So a lot of people might think that's spiritual life, going up to the Himalayas, sitting with crossed legs, chanting Om. I mean, how long can you do that for? Especially if it gets cold. So we may have this idea, that's spiritual life, retirement from active life. This is what Arjuna is thinking, to give it all up. I've already done all this. I've been a prince. I've worked with for the government, for the princely order, for the king. I've done so much. Now it's time. Let me just retire. So it's really interesting. Sometimes people think Krishna consciousness or Buddha yoga, intelligence and spiritual advancement of knowledge, as something like retirement from active life and the practice of penance and austerities in a secluded place. I mean, I always thought of like yogis, that was like, they're spiritual. They're somewhere else before I knew anything about Krishna consciousness. So in other words, he wanted, now Prabhupada says more of Arjuna's thoughts. In other words, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse. So he had his objective. He wanted to avoid the fight by all means. But at the same time, he wanted to do what Krishna wants him to do. But now Krishna kind of gave him a way out, about this Buddha yoga, intelligence of yoga, how now you can just retire, chant, go to a secluded place, perform austerities, and be peaceful. And he thought, this is my way out, so I'm going to explain this. But it's nice because in the next part, he wanted to skillfully avoid the fighting by using Krishna consciousness as an excuse, but as a sincere student. So he could have just heard what Krishna said and decided by just what Krishna said, the way he understood what Krishna was saying, that he should just retire. But as a sincere student, he placed the matter before his master, his spiritual master, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and questioned Krishna as to his best course of action. So this is what we do. We come to some conclusion. We don't understand. We're not sure how we should do, what we should do. But at the same time, we can question our guru, our spiritual master. What do you think I should do? Or not what do you think I should do? What should I do? And then we have to be prepared to do whatever they say. And even what they say, we can question. Arjuna is questioning Krishna. He didn't just accept, just fight for the sake of fighting, not considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. He could have just said, okay, right there. But he had questions. He still had doubts. Prabhupada says these doubts should be there. If someone is intelligent, they should have. He said, doubting is a sign of intelligence. But then you come to a point where you should no longer have any doubts. You may still have questions, but you don't have doubts about Krishna consciousness. So here, he was sincere. And because he was sincere, he didn't just try to escape from his service and just say, oh, okay, and just walk off the battlefield. And Krishna will say, where are you going? Oh, you just told me I should go. No, oh, sorry. No, he questioned. He asked Krishna what he should do. So here, and I'm going to read that even before I read the last sentence of the purport. Oh, Janardhan, okay, sure. Why do you want, so that's a question, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Now, he's not going to say, oh, you're right. Intelligence is better than fruitive work. You shouldn't fight this war. So he's saying it in such a way. Now, what do you think? You're saying intelligence is better than fruitive work, but yet you're telling me to fight this war. If you really think intelligence is better than fruitive work, you tell me not to fight this war. That's kind of what he's saying. And then in answer, Lord Krishna elaborately explained karma yoga, or work in Krishna consciousness, in the 3rd chapter. So that's without knowing how you can work for Krishna transcendentally. No, not no karmic reaction. There's akarma, vikarma, there's karma, akarma, vikarma, or karma, vikarma, and akarma. Now, there's karma is fruitive work where you do the right thing and you get a good reaction. Vikarma is work where you're doing a bad thing and you're going to get a bad reaction. And akarma is work that has no reaction. And that's the work that Krishna is going to explain to Arjuna. And that's the work he wants him to do in this battle. He doesn't want him to perform fruitive work. He doesn't want him to perform sinful work, sinful acts. He wants him to perform works, not for himself, but for Krishna. Okay, so does anyone have any comments or questions? Yes, Nanda Gopal.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So very nice class. So during sharing, you said Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness. So I have also heard or read Krishna consciousness as like a devotional service. So how can a neophyte like me understand like what is like, is it a Buddhi Yoga or devotional service? So
Okay, because you know Krishna consciousness is devotional service. But if I just said Krishna consciousness, pretty much that means not doing anything, just thinking of Krishna, conscious of Krishna. So this is where Arjuna is at. He's not understanding the full meaning of Krishna consciousness as devotional service. He's understanding it as using your intelligence and focusing on Krishna. So this is what we have to do is devotional service. Krishna consciousness means engaging all of your senses in Krishna's service. And then your mind is also a sixth sense, or the sense within. And then you also engage your mind in Krishna's service. It's certainly a lot easier to engage your mind in Krishna's service when all your body is engaged in Krishna's service. The more senses you have engaged in serving Krishna, the easier it is for your mind to be controlled and to think of your service, think of Krishna. So he's not at that point yet. Of course, he'll learn more. He says Krishna consciousness or Buddhi Yoga, intelligence, using your intelligence. He doesn't say devotional service. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Manishi.
So, Prabhuji, you mentioned that we should not have doubt, but we can question. So, isn't it that we initially have doubt, and for that we grow up and have question for maybe senior devotees or Guru Maharaj or anybody?
I maybe misunderstood. I said doubting is a sign of intelligence. You should have doubts if you're intelligent. If I just tell you this Krishna consciousness and you just accept it blindly, that's not very intelligent. Maybe you're super intelligent and it makes perfect sense and you understand it. But in general, you will have some questions. And that's a sign of doubting. That's a sign of intelligence. But after, we hear in the Bhagavatam, so many disciples questioning their gurus, Maitreya Rishi, and so many people, Maharaj Parikshit, they're questioning, and then their questions are being answered, and then they come to a point where now, I may still have some questions, but I have no more doubts. Yeah. So you can have questions, but in the beginning, you should have doubts where you're not sure if it's the right thing or not. Because if you just accept it blindly, then you can also reject it very blindly. You should be really convinced it should make perfect sense to you. It does make perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You may not understand everything, so you question, and then you see it makes perfect sense. And then after that point, then you don't have any doubts about Krishna consciousness. You may have questions, but just to understand even more. But you don't doubt in Krishna consciousness. So that's where you have to come to a point eventually of not doubting. In other words, right now I'm new. I'm not sure. Maybe Christianity is the way. Maybe Hindu is the way, maybe a Muslim, maybe a Jew, I can do this, what's the best thing for me? Of course, I don't know a lot of these philosophies, but people may study different religions and they're not sure which one makes the most sense. I studied by just talking to a lot of people. I actually never met a Muslim before I became a devotee. But everything I questioned, none of it was perfect until Krishna consciousness. And I asked questions, even with the other things. I asked questions, but when I didn't get good answers, then I would reject them. So similarly with Krishna consciousness, you'll get good answer because it's coming from Krishna. It's perfect. People may not follow it perfectly, but the philosophy is perfect. So you should have some doubts. I'm not saying now you should have some doubts, but at least in the beginning, you should have some doubts. Why should I give my life to this? So I got other things to do. But you have to give your life to it because otherwise it's just a waste of a life. But then you can still question. I have a lot of questions when I read Prabhupada's books. I don't understand something, but because I don't understand it, I don't come to the conclusion that, well, maybe Krishna is not God. That's what you don't doubt that anymore. Krishna's showed me time and time again he's God. And I hope I never forget these times because I forget things. But as long as I remember them, I'm not going to doubt. And as someone else said, which I also had the same realization, is how all these great personalities accept, Krishna as God. Not only Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When I first came, I didn't have a problem accepting Krishna. I had a problem accepting Lord Chaitanya. Because what I thought, which was, I think, an intelligent way to think, is 500 years ago, we had Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, because I come from an Italian tradition, so I know all these famous people 500 years ago. Now, why didn't I hear of Lord Chaitanya? They're not God. They're just ordinary people. I heard of them, but I never heard of Lord Chaitanya. If God was here, don't you think people would hear him? But then I understood later on that he didn't want to be. He just did as much as he could just in India, and he wanted someone else to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world and glorify his devotees. So Srila Prabhupada was that person to do it for the whole world. And even Prabhupada is not so known by many people. Most people don't know Srila Prabhupada. They know the Hare Krishna movement because he made it the Hare Krishna movement. Every other group that came to America is known by their guru. I don't want to mention any of their names because I don't want to mention bogus people and give them any recognition. But they're all known by their names. Every single group except for Prabhupada. Nobody knew Prabhupada. Not nobody, but very few people. They know the Hare Krishna movement. Okay, any other doubts? Questions?
Pyari Prabhu, I think one of the things that I also thought about it, the Renaissance happened the same time as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then in India too, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu descended, all the saints in different parts of India also descended. So when the Lord comes, he comes with this entourage and all good things happen around the world. So I'm thinking the Renaissance may be an extension of that. Shakespeare was there too. A lot of literary stuff, art stuff, all the good stuff happened from the earth.
They definitely say that. And somebody apparently just wrote a book on that, the Renaissance and how it's all from Lord Chaitanya. I don't know how you can write a book on it because I don't know how you can prove that by Lord Chaitanya coming, Leonardo da Vinci made all these different things. He was great inventor and stuff and so many things, and Michelangelo can paint these things. I don't know how we can say it as devotees because Lord Chaitanya came, God came, so many wonderful things happen all over the world. But, to prove it as a fact to someone, it'd be very difficult to do that. But
Yeah, I
somebody,
mean, I don't know. I had not heard about this book. I was just speculating. But what I'm saying is that definitely in India, a lot of saints descended at the same time, like the saints of Maharashtra. It's called the Bhakti Movement. And I mean, the history books we learned. But we learned that even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is one of the saints, but that's not,
Right.
we understood from Prabhupada the correct thing. But
Right.
all the other saints descended at the same time in different parts of India. So there was a surge of bhakti. And
Right.
that is true. And that is connected to,
Right.
because when the Lord comes, he brings his entourage.
right, that's easier to see. That's certainly easier to see than the rest of the world.
Actually, in southern India, the only way we heard about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is through our social studies books, which talks about the Bhakti movement. It's actually sociologically, it's considered a time when Bhakti started as a movement.
Well, you can understand why it started as a movement at that.
Right. It took me like 20 years of my life to recognize Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as God. And just like you, in the beginning, I had a very hard time. I mean, we grew up knowing him as a saintly personality, but not as God. I mean, of course, I think in Bengal, maybe obviously there were families that worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as God. But we in southern India, coming from southern India, I had a very hard time recognizing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as God.
He did go to the south, though.
Now I know, but growing up, I never heard that he ever visited the south or
Pyari Prabhu, whenever I had these doubts, I had many times these doubts. Like Krishna, of course, unconditionally, we've all heard of Krishna, we know he's God. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is God himself, when reading in the Back to Godhead magazine. But then I always told myself, Prabhupada is one of the most intelligent persons that I know in my lively. And if he believes that he's God, and then my Guru Maharaj believes he's God, they are far more intelligent and far more superior than me. And if their intellect tells them that he's God, then I have to accept that he's God. And that's how my faith grew, that I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to come out with my own thinking. I'm just going to go with their thinking and just accept whatever they say is the 100% truth. And then that way my faith will develop,
Right. Yeah, that's where I thought of, mainly with Prabhupada, and also Bhakti Siddhanta, Bhakti Vinod, the 6 Goswamis. It's like, these people are so smart and they all accept this. Who am I? I'm like an idiot compared to these people. But anyway.
And then later on, you also recognize he came as a good avatar, you know what I'm saying? So he did not want to. He came as a Gouda avatara, you know what I'm saying? As a
hidden incarnation.
Hidden avatara, hidden incarnation.
I know. You almost said like Guna avatar, which
no, Gouda. Da.
Yeah, he was hidden. That was his plan. That's why we didn't know about him.
Right. That's why that was his plan.
Also because he wanted to teach us how to serve Krishna, not be Krishna. And in order to teach how to serve, he had to do it. And then they see that's how we should serve Krishna. So he had to do it, not be Krishna, but be a servant of Krishna. In the Bhagavad Gita, surrender and I'll, surrender unto me. And then people interpret surrender unto me. It means the internal, means myself, basically. Surrender to me. I mean, me, who's me? Me is me. So surrender to me. Ah, yes. Now I got it. So Lord Chaitanya came and told these stupid, foolish people, not surrender to me means surrender to Krishna. This is how you do it, not surrender to me. So he had to come. He couldn't come right out and say he was God. But then those great saints who basically have eternal relationships with Krishna, they of course recognized him, and he didn't deny it. He allowed them to understand it. But for general mass of people, he was just a servant of God. And that's why the textbooks say it, because that's what that's what it seems like all he is.
Right. All the textbooks say him as a great saintly personality, servant of God. Yeah.
That's what he wanted to be, so that people can understand how to surrender to Krishna. And that's how you're supposed to be. Okay, any other comments or questions? I'm not going to read another verse because I'm not going to have time. Okay, we're going to end early, which I don't think I
Hare
ever.
Krishna.
Oh,
Hare Krishna, Pyari Prabhuji, Tanvat Pranam. I think Prahlad Maharaj also says about Lord Chaitanya when he says to the Lord the prayer. I'll just read, in this way, my Lord, you appear in various incarnations as a human being, an animal, a great saint, a demigod, a fish, or a tortoise, thus maintaining the entire creation in different planetary systems and killing the demonic principles. According to the age, O my Lord, you protect the principle of religion in this age of Kali. However, you do not assert yourself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore you are known as Three Yugi, or the Lord who appears in three yugas. So, actually, Prahlad Maharaj also mentions about Lord Chaitanya in his prayers to the Lord. I just wanted to make that.
yeah, we're just reading about Lord Chaitanya in the 11th canto. Just, well, today and a few days before too. So I'm going to read some quotes about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. If I can find it. Shouldn't be too hard because it wasn't too long ago.
Yeah, Prabhuji, 11:532, I think there is a verse about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
So in Satya Yuga, he came as Ram. In Treta Yuga, what did he come as, Padmalochini?
Satya Yuga as Hamsa, in Treta Yuga as Ram.
Oh, Treta Yuga as Ram.
Yeah.
Where that verse is, Jiva.
Krishna.
Okay,
Thank you.
This is in chapter 5, text 32. This is a famous verse a lot of you may know. Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam Sango Pangastra Harshadam Yagyai Sankirtana Prayai Yajantihi Sumeda Saha. In the age of Kali, intelligent persons perform congregational chanting to worship the incarnation of Godhead, who constantly sings the names of Krishna. Although his complexion is not blackish, he is Krishna himself. He is accompanied by his associates, servants, weapons, and confidential companions. And in the purport, just in case you want to know what his weapons are, it's his beauty. Right, Jiva? His beauty, that's his weapons. How he used it. And then the next verse, my dear Lord, this is text 33, you are the Mahapurusha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I worship your lotus feet, which are the only eternal object of meditation. Those feet destroy the embarrassing conditions of material life and freely award the greatest desire of the soul, the attainment of pure love of Godhead. My dear Lord, your lotus feet are the shelter of all holy places and all saintly authorities in the line of devotional service, and we are honored by powerful demigods like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. My Lord, you are so kind that you willingly protect all those who simply bow down to you with respect, and thus you mercifully relieve all the distress of your servants. In conclusion, my Lord, your lotus feet are actually the suitable boat for crossing over the ocean of birth and death, and therefore even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva seek shelter at your lotus feet. And okay, I thought that was going to be more Lord Chaitanya, but maybe it's the next one. Let's see. Lotus feet. Being the most faithful follower of the path of religion. Okay, you thus left for the forest. Oh, here, this is good. O Mahaparusha, I worship your lotus feet. You gave up the association of the goddess of fortune, okay, and all her opulence, which is most difficult to renounce and is hankered after by even the great demigods. Being the most faithful follower of the path of religion, you thus left for the forest in obedience to a Brahmana's curse. Out of sheer mercifulness, you chased after the fallen conditioned souls who are always in pursuit of the false engagement of illusion, and at the same time engaged in searching out your own desired object, Lord Shamasundar. So now I'm just going to read a little of this purport because the beginning of it. It's a long purport. I'm only going to read a little bit though. According to the Vaishnava Acharyas, this important verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam is understood to describe Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Krishna, and also Lord Sri Ramachandra. So this verse is describing them all. The verse appears within the discussion of the sage Karabhajana of the Yuga avatars, or the different incarnations of the personality of Godhead who deliver the conditioned souls of each age. The prayers ending with the words Vande Mahapurusha Te Charanaravindam are understood to glorify the incarnations of Lord Krishna in Kali Yuga, known as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived for 24 years in Navadvip. So all of them were basically, they left the goddess of fortune. You know, of course, let's see, you gave up the association of the goddess of fortune. Now, Lord Ramachandra, he stayed, oh, you can look at him different ways. But Lord Ramachandra was with Sita, but then he went to the forest, and Lord Chaitanya went, anyway, they explain it in the purport. If you want to read it, it's text 34. But this verse is describing three of them: Ramachandra, Krishna, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Anyway.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Then Prabhu, how could this verse be applicable to Lord Krishna? Because Krishna did not live, goddess of.
Well, in the purport, it does explain it. Let me find it, Krishna.
Plus,
it's a very long purport. It's 1, 2, 3.
What verse is this? 34 of what?
Oh, it's 11, 5, 34. Do you have the Bhagavatam? Because it's a really long verse. You'll have to read it. I don't want to take everyone's
I will
time.
check it out. 11, 5, 34. Huh?
Said he left the opulence of Mathura and went to.
Oh, yeah. He left the opulence of Mathura, which was an opulent city, and he went to Vrindavan, the forest.
I think he went to, but after that he went to Dwaraka.
Well, it didn't say what they do. They did something at one point. It's not like they ended there and that was the end. They all went to the forest and then they came back from the forest.
But Lord Chaitanya did not come back. He took
He never stayed in the forest.
No, but he took sannyas. It's like, it's not about forest.
He stayed renounced, yes. But all of those things, it's like left the goddess of fortune. Lord Ramachandra, he didn't leave, but the goddess of fortune was carried away. So for a while, but then he got her back. And then she left again. He banned her, he made her leave again. So he had but anyway, you can read that purport. I don't got time to read 5-6 pages. But it does say about he left Mathura, which was a nice, opulent city, and went to the forest of Vrindavan. So for a little while he did that. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, especially those who were brave enough to turn on their cameras. I see Krishna turn on his camera. Oh, there. Oh, yeah, Paul. There's somebody there. I mean, even having Krishna, it's like somebody's there, you know, it's nice. I could see somebody talking to. I don't see much reactions though from Krishna, but anyway, thank you all. Hare Krishna, glories to Srila Prabhupada, Vancha
Patanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha.
Vaishnavibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namah Anantakoti Vaishnavadin ki Jai Srila Prabhupada ki Jai
Jai.
His Grace Pyari Mahaprabhu ki Jai.
Jai.